So today what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit more of an in-depth look at different SQL functions that we can run. More specifically, we're going to take a look at what are called aggregate functions. So basically, if you want to get, the minimum number of a set, or the maximum number, or the ceiling, or the floor, or the least, or the most, what we would do is we would use the ag functions, or what we call the ag functions in SQL, to get those values for us. So for this demo, I'm going to go over the SQL aggregate functions. Now feel free to follow along with me and to pause the video if you like to catch up, or you can just watch. You can just do either or. If you're going to be following along with me, you may want to get the auctions table. So if you want to follow the video, just send me an email and ask for the auctions table, and what I'll do is I'll send it to you as a file attachment. So anyway, let's get started. This is what we're going to do. We're going to start working with some SQL aggregate functions. Now to do that, we're going to need some test data. And I have some test data loaded on my system, and you're going to have to get a hold of the script from me. Somehow I'm going to be able to, or I'm going to have to find some way to get this script to you that we're going to run in a second. But anyway, go to Application Express if you're following along with me. And again, I encourage you guys to follow along with me and stop the tape or stop the video if you would, and follow these examples with me. So let me just go and log in. Nope, hold on, let me get internet here. Pardon me, folks. In airplane mode. All right, let me do that again. Let me log back in. Sorry about that. There we go. Let me log in. And let me show you how you can get some test data. Now, what we've been doing so far is we've been working with some tables, but not with a lot of data in them. So what I did is I wrote a script here, and I'm going to have to find some way to either email you the script or you could get the script from me, but we'll figure that out. I'm going to go into SQL Workshop. And then from here, I'm going to go to SQL Scripts. And I wrote a script that we're going to use for some test data for today. And I named it SC Populate Auctions. So I'm going to click on Edit. And I'm going to leave you with a little bit of dead air so you can kind of look at the script a little bit. And I'm going to explain to you what it is. So I'm going to give you about maybe 15 seconds of dead air, and then we're going to describe what the script actually does. Okay, now it's a very simple script. Now what it does is it builds for us a table. Now I'm just going to kind of make it look a little bit pretty here. So basically we're creating a table called auctions. Now notice this table is a very simple table, and to keep things simpler, if that's a real word, notice I'm not using anything like a primary key. I'm not using any kind of foreign key constraints, and I'm doing nothing with check constraints. It's just a plain old table with just some columns in there. So we have the item column. This is going to be the item in an auction that was bought. We're going to have the date the auction, or pardon me, the date the item was bought. We're going to have how much we bought the item for. Then we're going to have how much we sold the item for, and how much, or pardon me, the date that we sold the item, and then how much we sold the item for. So it's a very simple table. It would be kind of like if you were keeping track of any kind of auctions, like if you were, buying and selling stuff like on eBay or any of the auction sites, and you were creating, some kind of web form or some kind of interface or some kind of application that would hold this data. What you bought, the date you bought it, how much you sold it for, how much you bought it for, when you sold it, and then the sell price. So we don't have a ton of data in here. We just have a few things. We have here the we sold a radio, and then notice the toDate function. Now, if you haven't seen the toDate function, don't panic. What toDate does is it takes something that's not necessarily the default Oracle date format and just makes it a date. So don't panic. This is just making a string into a date if it's not in the Oracle default date format. And then we have, again, a number. Again, this number here is, I believe, the buy price. And then we have a column here where we're putting in the date that we sold the item, and then we're putting in the sell price. A very simple table. We have, how many rows are we putting in here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just maybe a dozen or so. Not a whole bunch. Not a whole bunch. But this sure beats typing it in by hand. So this is what I did. And like I said, I'm going to have to find some way to get you the script via email or whatever. We'll figure it out. But anyway, when you get the script, just go into SQL Workshop and then go into Script Editor. And then from Script Editor, put in the script that I'm going to give you or you're going to obtain from me. And then when you're finished, just run the script. Save it, of course. You could call it anything you like. I really don't care. It doesn't matter. It's your script. You can do with it whatever you want to do. So in this case, I'm going to click on Run. I'm going to run my script, and it should just run. It should, as we say in the business, it should just work. So I click on Run. And you should see, in your case, you won't see table dropped because in your instance, you probably don't have that table in your system. So you should see, table does not exist. But remember, that's just a warning message. That's fine. And then you should see table created, and then each of the rows that we're putting into the table. And it should see one row inserted all the way down. All right, so let's start working with aggregate functions. So I'm going to kind of go back and forth between like Notepad and SQL command line. So I can kind of, have these SQL statements, in sort of a, like a scratch pad or like a notepad. So I can kind of go back and forth and go over these examples. So if you're following along with me, now that we've got our test data, we're going to go into SQL command line and go over some of these aggregate functions. So I'm going to navigate to SQL commands, and that should be it. And then Oracle Apex is waiting for us to put my commands in. All right, so I'll give you guys a second to kind of catch up. And then if you're here, what you can do is, if you like, you can open up Notepad. And what I'll do is at the end of class tonight is I'll, just like normal, is I'll send you my notes, which is going to be kind of strange because you'll probably get the notes before you'll get the video for the class, which might be somewhat confusing, but I'm sure you'll figure it out. Okay, so anyway, let's go over the aggregate function. So I'm going to open up Notepad. And let's start with some warm-up exercises. And again, SQL is caseless, but I'm just going to kind of go back and forth. Like we could do, how about select star from, and the column is called auctions. Just a warm-up. You've seen this before. Remember the syntax for a select. You're going to have select, you're going to have star, from auctions. Now, star just means all columns. Now, remember in a select statement, after select is you have a list of columns separated by a comma, except for the last column, which does not have a comma in it. So in this case, we're just going to select everything from auctions. So I'm going to take this command, paste it in, and we'll get something like this. Select star from auctions. We run our SQL statement. and we should get a result set. Just give me a second. So I want to make sure I got a good level going, and I do. So pardon me. You weren't supposed to see that. Okay, so we have the item, the date bought, the buy price, the date sold, the sell price. And we got how many rows of data we have? About a dozen or so. And hold on, I'm getting weird system messages here. So just to make sure I'm still recording, it looks like I'm good. Pardon me. Again, I got a weird system message that popped up. All right, anyway, you might want to pause the video here. You may if you want to, and just look at the result set. And just look at what you're dealing with. And look at the data types. Like, for example, radio, which is a variable character, I believe. You got the date bought, the buy price, the date sold, the sell price. And then if you scroll to the right, you got the you have the amount that you sold it for. So you can look at this result set if you want. Like I said, I'll give you a second to pause the video if you're inclined to do so. And if it's too big or small, remember you can hit Control plus to make this larger, or Control minus to make it smaller. So I'm going to try to find a balance between them. All right, anyway. So that's a warm-up. Now let's talk about aggregate functions. So aggregate functions do the following. I'm going to put in this. I'm just going to go back and forth. Whoops. I'll say aggregate functions return one summed up value. What does that mean? Let me explain you something. And you're going to see ag functions or aggregate functions meaning the same thing. You'll often see me put ag for aggregate. An aggregate function will return one summed up value. Now, what does that mean in English? For example, let's go over a couple of them. Let's go over count. What count does is it'll return to us the number of rows returned. Count returns the number of rows returned. All right, what does that mean? Well, let me just save this here. Save, put in notes. N-O-T-S, notes. And again, I'll find somebody to get this to you if you want them. For example, let's just say that you don't necessarily want to see all of your result set. You don't care about looking at all your columns. You don't care about radios, date bought, date sold, sell price, buy price, anything. Your boss taps you on the shoulder and she says, how many records do we have in our auctions table? And that's where count will come in. So we could say for example, rather than select star, we can say select count. Return to us the number of rows. Again, it just returns one row. That will represent the number of rows that we have in our auctions table. So if I click on run, I'll get one row returned to me, and it returns 18. So we have 18 rows that are in our auctions table. It also will return, again, the amount of rows that qualify. Like, for example, I'm going to go back to select star. And how about this? The select star from auctions. So let's just say, again, our boss taps us on the shoulder and she says, how many items do we have in our auctions table that are radio for the items? How many radio items are in our auction table? We could do something like this. Select star from auctions where, pardon me, item equal radio. Radio. Select star from auctions where item equal radio. So I click on run, And I could do this. I could count them. In this case, there's only 2. But let's just say there was a lot of them. I could count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or what I could use is I could use the aggregate function count. So basically, in English or in common speak, this is saying, just tell me how many of them I have. I don't want to see the result set of them. I don't want to see anything else except how many of them I have. So then I click on run. And not surprisingly, this says I have 2 of them. Now, just as an aside, when we talk about aggregate functions, we're talking about these aggregate functions that we're using are ANSI aggregate functions, which means that they're supported by all, or should be supported by all database management systems. So this lecture, although we're using Oracle Apex as the tool, should work in any other language. If you're using Enterprise Manager for SQL Server or DB2 or any other database management system, these SQL statements should work just fine. Again, this is not proprietary Oracle stuff. This is just pretty much plain old ANSI aggregate functions. So that's count. We're going to kind of get a little bit more complex as we go, because you're looking at this and you're yawning already. You're going, oh gosh, this is going to be so easy. And it kind of is. But we got to go over them at least once. So count gives us the number of records that qualify, again, from the where clause or the lack of a where clause. So let's go over a couple more. That was count. We also have, I'm putting count, that's a function. We also have max, like max headroom. Now, if you're under the age of 40 or maybe even 50, you probably don't even know who max headroom is. Google max headroom for an imaginary extra credit bonus point. This will return the largest entry of a column. Max will return the largest entry of a column. One thing I want to point out about using these aggregate functions is that there's not a lot of them. Half dozen, 8, 9, 10, 12. There's not a lot. There really isn't. Count, max, we're going to go over a couple more. So, for example, let's go over max. I'm going to save notes as I go. And let's go over the SQL statement again. Let's say we're doing the following. We'll do select star from auctions. Back to our main SQL statement, and we got, X amount of rows that are returned. Now, our boss taps us on the shoulder, and she says, write me a SQL statement. Remember, SQL statements are usually the source for reports too. So if you're writing reporting systems against the table, you probably are using SQL to do it. So you often hear me use the term report for a SQL select, and I kind of do that unconsciously because a select statement is usually the source of a report that you would actually write in any kind of dashboard, in any kind of reporting application. So your boss taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey Bob, you're stupid." Well, hopefully not. But your boss taps you on the shoulder and says, "Give me the largest buy price for anything we've ever bought." We could say something like this. We could say select max, and then we put in the name of the column, which is buy price. From auctions. So what this does is it says, again, we're not interested in looking at the result set for anything. We just want to see what the maximum buy price is for anything that we bought in auctions. So again, select max buy price from auctions. We run. And we get $500. Now notice we don't see anything else. We don't see like what we bought for $500, but don't worry about that for now. Right now what we're doing is we're just focusing on aggregate functions. Now, on the flip side of that, we have min. Now, min gives us the smallest entry of a column. Smallest entry of a column. Now, min is really just the flip side of max. So if we wanted to see the minimum by price, we could say select min, by price from auctions. And we run. And the internet's a little slow tonight, but we're going to get our result coming back 4.56. So the minimum buy price we have for any item in our auctions is $4.56. Now again, notice that the aggregate functions only bring one value back, and they don't bring a result set back. It's like calling a function, and that the function returns one value. Again, now when I say calling a function, I'm talking about in math, not just necessarily in Oracle or in databases here, but if you have a math class which you develop a macro or a function, that function only returns one value, as it does here. So when we run this, in this case for the min function, for the aggregate function, we only get one value back. So minimum buy price from auctions, and we get just $4.56. So got a couple more. Again, I'm going to kind of go quickly through this because you're getting the recipe, and then we're going to start using them together. And also, let me kind of close this. Got some stuff don't need necessarily. And we have average. And this is the average entry of a column. The average entry of a column. And that goes without really saying. So if we want to see the average buy price, we can say AVG, buy price from auctions. And then click on run. So our average buy price is $129.92. All right, that is fairly easy. Let's start working with these and putting them together. We have, again, we went over count, max, min, and average. What we can do now is we can start putting these together if we like. And we are here. So let's go over that example. Let me go over this and go over how this would work. Like if we want to see, like for example, how about this? We want to see the min buy price, the max buy price, and the average buy price. So I'll give you a little bit of dead air to kind of look at this, maybe type it in and get the example working, or not. Okay, so at this point, we can run our application or run our SQL statement. And you're going to get the following return to you. Oh, pardon me, max. Should be min. You guys do that, though. I hear you guys screaming through my computer. It should be min. It should be min. And click on run. So here we go. We got the min buy price, the max, and then the average. Fairly simple stuff. Now we can actually combine these as well. Like for example, if we want to look at, how about this? We want to look at how many auction records we have. And then we're going to look at the min buy price, the max buy price, and the average. So we could do something like this. We could say count. And it'll be count, should be like star. Which basically means how many records do we have? Give us the minimum buy price, the maximum buy price, and the average buy price. And then click on Run. Oh, pardon me, I need to have a comma after my count. Remember, when we have a select, it's a comma delimited list, except for the last one that doesn't have a comma at all. So at this point, I'll click on Run. And pardon me, I apologize for these things that pop up. It's kind of annoying. I try to turn it off and it winds up turning itself back on. So if you see one of these, just politely ignore it. Whoops. Okay, so let me run. So here I have 18 records in my auction table. I have a minimum buy price of $4.56 and a maximum of $500 and an average buy price of $129.92.0555556. And don't worry about rounding for now. Now, you're kind of getting it here. One thing I want to point out is notice when I'm working with aggregate functions, I'm not really, in this case, really concerned with what this is. I'm not concerned with looking at the items and each individual buy price, each individual sell price. I'm looking at summing up information. And that's what you see here. When we're working with aggregate functions, we're kind of assuming that we're working with summary data like we are here. We're not interested, in our case, again, this is our data, we could do what we want to. We're really not interested in looking at each individual record. In this case, we're like, you know what, we don't need to see each individual transaction or each individual record. What we want to see is aggregations of them. Or in this case, how many do we have, what's the minimum, what's the maximum, and what's the average. So that's why it's important that I point out and you guys understand that when we work with aggregate functions, we're kind of assuming we're only bringing back a single value. We don't care how many, in this case, how many of them are radios, how many are CDs, or each individual record. We're interested in aggregations of those records or these records that are summed up. Now we can also use math in this too. We can use computed columns. Like for example, if we wanted to see, how about this? Oh, there's one more I want to show you. Let me show you sum. We have average. We have sum. Now sum is the I'll do this in common terms. All values of a column added up. Summary. Sums all of them. For example, let me go back to our example here that we're going over in Oracle Apex. Okay, how about this? We could say select, and we'll say sum of the buy price from auctions. So here I got select sum of the buy price from auctions. What this will do is it'll take all my buy prices and sum them up for me. And again, since it's an aggregate function, it's only going to bring me back one value in place. So give it a second. So the sum is $2,338.57. Now we can actually check that if we wanted to just by doing select all from auctions. So what sum is doing is it's just taking the buy price, all of these guys here, and just adding them up for me. It's summing them. It's a summation. It's a sigma. So anyway, do the following and pause the video and try this. Write me a SQL statement or write a SQL statement that shows me the sum of all my buy prices and the sum of all my sell prices, and another column that shows me what my profit was. I'll say that again. Write me a SQL statement that has 3 columns. The sum of my buy prices, the sum of my sell prices, and another column that's going to show me my profit. Now pause the video and try the exercise. When you're finished with the exercise, resume the video and compare your answer to my solution. Hello, welcome back. Hopefully you paused the video and you tried that exercise on yourself, by yourself. Now, what I asked of you is I wanted you to write a SQL statement. I wanted you to write a SQL statement that has the sum of all my buy prices, the sum of all my sell prices, and then a column that shows me what my profit was, assuming that I made a profit. So let's get started. This is the answer I came up with. We can say select sum of the buy price and we could say and then also the sum of the sell price. I'll give you guys a second to get that typed in, and then we're going to run this and kind of, solve it one column at a time. Okay, so let me run this SQL statement. And I get something that looks like this. Ooh. So some of my sell prices are $2,371.18. The sum of my buy price is $2,038.57. Not necessarily a really good profit margin, right? Let me show you something else here, and we're getting off on a little bit of a tangent. Let's alias these columns. You see how our columns are exactly the name of our columns here? We can alias them by putting in as, and we could put in, how about total? Buy price. And here we can say as total sell price. All right, let's try that. Again, this just aliases our columns, just so our columns look a little bit more pretty. It doesn't change the functionality at all. So we get something like that. See, all we did is we changed our headings to be something more useful. All right, now I'm going to try something here. I'm going to try, how about this? I will say sum. I'm going to put in sell price minus the sum of the buy price and I'll put in as profit. Now, when you run this, you may get something a little unexpected. First of all, I need to put a comma here. Remember, we need commas after each column. So let me add that. And there we go. So here's the solution. We have the total buy price, the total sell price, and then what your profit margin was. We made $32.61. It seems to be an awful lot of work to do to make $32.61, but that's what we did. So anyway, like I said before, when you're working with aggregate functions, you're really looking at just different aggregate values for your data. Notice I'm not looking at my data itself. I'm just kind of doing totals on it. And that's what aggregate functions are for. So you don't necessarily, like I'm saying here, we're not necessarily saying, show me all of my items, show me all of my records, or all my result sets where we sold radios, or show me all my result sets where we sold CDs, show me all my result sets where we sold stereos. We don't care about that. When we're using aggregate functions, we're basically saying, show me total information. How many records do we have? What was the total buy price for everything? What was the total sell price for everything? What was our profit margin? Now, let me show you a couple more things that we could do with this. This is all I want to show you as far as aggregate functions go. Pardon me. This is all I want to show you as far as aggregate functions go. There's other ones as well, and I'm going to show you one more. We got count, we have max, we have min, we have average, we have sum. We also have one called standard deviation. I'm not going to show that to you. I will say this. I will say, how about this? I want you to do this on your own. Look up floor look up ceiling. Is that spelled right? I think so. And look up standard deviation. Pardon me. It looks like that's a function. Pardon me, I'm stuttering here. When I mean look up, I mean you look up, not that it's a function. I'll put in you, the student, look up the following functions. Put in following SQL functions. Look up floor, ceiling, and standard deviation. Spend 10 minutes on this. Don't spend any longer on this. These are ones that I'm not demoing. There's some other ones as well. We demoed count. I demoed max. I demoed min. I demoed average. I demoed sum. So there you go. Let me show you one that's not necessarily an aggregate. I'm just going to put in other functions. Put other functions, and I'll put in like egg functions. They're not really egg functions, but they're like egg functions. All right, let me show you distinct. Distinct. I-N-C-T. There we go. You can tell I can't spell anything. Remember, I'm a math computer science major. I can't spell. I can only abbreviate and give you formulas. That's it. Not only can't I can't spell, I can't read at all. I'm married to someone that's completely into literature, that corrects my grammar and has read every book in the world, and I have this no clue, no idea. Absolutely no idea. All right, let me show you distinct. Now, what distinct does is distinct will show me each distinct value for something, or each what's called an atomic value. An atomic value is, think about your chemistry in high school, like when an atom is your lowest, at least in theory, is your smallest possible thing of matter. Now we know that's really not true if you're into physics. I mean, there's quarks and a bunch of other stuff, but we still use the term atomic. Atomic means is we can't get any lower than that. It's as low as we could go. Now, when we use distinct, we're using atomic values, which means show me only one of a value if it exists, and if it doesn't exist, don't show it to me at all. Now, what does that mean in English? Well, let me show you. Let me go into our data here, and I'm just going to leave this up on the screen for a little bit if you need to take a screenshot. Okay, so let's go back and just look at everything again. So we'll do a select star from auctions and then run. And I'll leave you a couple minutes or a couple seconds of dead air as you're looking at this. All right, anyway, distinct will show me atomic values for a specific column. For example, notice our item column here, and we're looking at everything in our auctions table. We got radio, we got CD, we got radio, DVD, computer, laptop, zip disk. Remember them? Gosh. And whatever. So, our boss taps us on the shoulder and says, give me a list of items that we auction. Now, obviously, you can't look at this and look at them and say, well, we got a radio, we got a CD, we got all this other stuff. But what you can do is you can use the distinct function. Now, distinct is kind of a quasi-aggregate function, but don't worry about the definition. Just worry about what distinct does. You don't got to categorize it. Is it an aggregate function? Is it not? It does.